Welcome to part 9 of this series, the Roman Empire and the Holy Land. In this video we're going to be speaking more about the Hittites, and we're going to try use a map to get a visual representation of what we were speaking about in the previous video. The picture we're looking at is a picture of the Hittite war chariot, so we're also going to be speaking about the Hittite war chariots. But I'd like to refer back to a video we did a while ago called Were the Biblical Hittites in Africa? It's in the playlist What Do We Know About Esau or Edom? And in this video we were using this source. It was a scholar that was speaking about Hittites in Africa, and just the main gist of the source was that we have these ancient mines and ruins in the land of Rhodesia, what we now know as Zimbabwe. And the scholar was saying, according to his view, he thought it was the Hittites that were responsible because they had the expertise and the know-how. So that was his one of his reasons. But he also used the Hottentots to also add to his theory. And we have spoken about the Hottentots or the Khoi Khoi in our previous videos. And we're going to use the source. I would like to read a quote from the source that we used for this video. So if we read this part, it says, so we're speaking about the Hittites. Among the great political forces of the ancient Oriental world, we now know that none exercised a more profound influence than the Hittites of Asia Minor. It was they who overthrew the Amorite dynasty of Babylon, to which the Amraphel of Genesis belonged, and we learned that Amraphel could be Nimrod. To them was due the fall of the Egyptian Empire in Asia, and it was they who checked for centuries the desolating advance of the Assyrians. So we're going to use this quote for the video, but before we do that, I just want to try to get an idea about the Hittite expertise, because in that video, we said that he chose the Hittites because they were the ones that had the expertise and the know-how. So I just want to read about that a little bit. So I noticed when I was looking for a map on the Hittites, so just to get an idea of what we've been presented with, so the Hittite realm we've been told is in predominantly in the country of Turkey, but I noticed here it said that the Hittites were supposed to be the inventors of iron and steel. So maybe one of the first civilizations to be working with iron and steel, but it comes from written evidence, and they're starting to doubt the written evidence because it's interesting. It says here that they're not finding the artifacts in this region. So that doesn't make sense, because if the Hittites were one of the first civilizations to be working with iron and steel, then you would expect lots of artifacts to be found in this region, and they're not finding them. So now they're starting to doubt the written evidence. So that's interesting. Okay, let's read this source. It says, the Hittites monopolized ironwork until the fall of the empire, when they migrated to other regions. The Hittites can attribute much of their success to their adeptness for metallurgy, which is the use of metals and the science of separating metals from their ores. The Hittites developed new techniques for using iron around 1500 BC. Up until this time, weapons were generally made from bronze. Bronze is harder and heavier than iron. The use of iron weapons, which remained unique to the Hittites, helped achieve successful military campaigns. So this just gives us more idea for the Hittites that they do seem to have this this knowledge and this skill, according to the sources of this knowledge of working with the metals and metallurgy. And if they were one of the first civilizations to transition to iron and steel, that could give them an advantage in the warfare. So that can give us an idea why they were a match for the Hittites. For the Egyptian Empire. And if we go to the chariots, so there's the picture that we used at the start. So it says a drawing of an Egyptian relief, the Hittite chariot. It says here, the Hittites were renowned charioteers, and they developed a new chariot design that had lighter wheels, with 4 spokes rather than 8, and that held 3 rather than 2 warriors. So just that we get the idea that the Hittites seem to be at the forefront of the technology in the ancient world, with the metallurgy and also with the warfare, with the chariots. And that might support what he was saying in that source, that the Hittites seem to have the knowledge and the skill to be to be working with these metals and this mining, and that it would be important for them to control the resources. That says here, look, Hittite prosperity largely depended on their control of trade routes and natural resources, specifically metals. So that's why we were speaking about the Iberian Peninsula in the previous video, because that region would be important. And then it goes on to speak about the Battle of Kadesh. So this may have been the largest chariot battle ever fought between the Hittites and the Egyptians. So the Hittites and the Egyptians, major rivals in the ancient world. And that's what I'd like to speak about now, because if we think about this map, so when we try to keep in our minds that they're saying the Hittite realm was in what we know as a country as Turkey, but I want to speak about what we were speaking in the previous video with the Iberian Peninsula, and all those things we were saying, that this could actually be the strength of the Hittite Empire, or the home of the Hittite, the Hittite Empire. So what we'd be saying is something a little bit different. So whenever we hear a source, we go here and it says that the Hittites were responsible for the fall of the Egyptian Empire in Asia. We're not thinking Asia, we're thinking the Iberian Peninsula. So that's something that we have to try to think about when we hear terms like Anatolia or Asia Minor for the Hittites. We're actually thinking about the Iberian Peninsula. So let's go to our map and have a look. Okay, so we've gone back in time here. We've got the 4 sons of Ham: Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And I've got Canaan here in West Africa because we learned from the book of Jubilees that Canaan seized Palestine wrongfully. So he saw the territory he was supposed to occupy, but he preferred the land of Lebanon, or the land of Arphaxad, or the land of Shem. So that's why I've got the arrow here pointing south, because I just want to speak about what actually makes sense. If we just use the book of Jubilees, why would Canaan not want to live here in northwest Africa, and then he goes to the Middle East, because that's what we've been presented with the Holy Land in the Middle East. That doesn't make sense on the face of it, because it's not a better land, it's still a desert or an arid region, and then his territory might also be much smaller. If we move this across to try and get an idea, how much would it have to shrink to fit in this region? So why would Canaan do that? That doesn't really make sense with what Jubilees is saying. It sounds like he's going into the land of Shem because it's a better land, it's a good land. So that so we're going to keep working with this picture, because it actually does make sense that Canaan saw the land of Shem, and we've got the arrow pointing to the south. And if we think about these countries like Ghana, Nigeria, and the Cameroon and Gabon, and we think about even like Lake Chad, the further back in time we go, the bigger Lake Chad actually was. And there are some sources that say it may have been one of the greatest or one of the biggest freshwater lakes in the world. So imagine how inviting this region may have looked even in the time of Canaan. So what I'd like to do now is change my map so we can talk about the Hittites and the Egyptians, that rivalry. So give me a second to go back in time. Okay, so we're almost there. Just get to Canaan. Okay, so what I've got now with the map is to show what we just said. So we've moved Canaan into the Holy Land. So Canaan's come into the Holy Land, into the land of Lebanon, or the land of Shem. We've got the Hittites, very large, very bold, because they're very powerful, and they've got this dominance over the Iberian Peninsula. And they've got these arrows to show the conflict between Egypt and the Hittites. So that's what we're trying to picture now. If we go back to that quote, just now we can visually see when it says that the Hittites were responsible for the fall of the Egyptian Empire in Asia, we're thinking that, it's speaking about West Africa towards the Iberian Peninsula, that the Hittites are responsible for, so that Egypt, losing control or their influence towards the Iberian Peninsula. But then we also have these arrows pointing south towards the Holy Land, because the Hittites also going to have an interest and an influence on the Holy Land, and Egypt also wanting to have an influence on the Holy Land. And then Assyria here quite small, just to show that they're waiting in the wings, and the power of their empire has not quite come yet. So just so we can visually see what we actually saying. And if we think about what we have here, with Canaan in this region, then it actually might make more sense with what we were speaking about. Remember with Heth, son of Canaan, so the Hittites coming out of Canaan, and then we think about that video with that we did about Hittites in Africa. Could the Hittites have been responsible for this ancient mining and these ancient ruins in Rhodesia or the land of Zimbabwe? Now we've got a picture that actually looks a bit more, let's say, believable or makes sense, because now we can see that there is a Hittite presence in Africa, and it's not far-fetched to see that how they could have an influence further south towards the land of Zimbabwe. So that's the picture that we're working with. And if I wanted to just speak about a couple of things that we mentioned in the previous video with the why the Iberian Peninsula would be important for the Hittites if we go to that map. So remember we spoke about the land of Tarshish, and that this here in southern Spain could be the land of Tarshish or Cilicia, and that source said that the Hittites had free reign over this region of Cilicia, and that that could be important. So now we can see visually why it would be important for the Hittites to have free reign over this region. If we go to a bigger map, if we think about the Straits of Gibraltar or the Pillars of Hercules, it's very important for the Hittites to be able to move through this region. Remember it said how they want to make war in Syria. If they lose control of the Straits of Gibraltar, then their empire could potentially be cut off. If we think about that, if they lose control of this Straits of Gibraltar, and remember how it said that the Hittite power and their strength was in Cappadocia, so their power is in the Iberian Peninsula, and then they're making war in Syria, towards the Holy Land. So they do have holdings in this region, but their power and their strength is on the Iberian Peninsula. So if they lose access, or if they lose this region of the Straits of Gibraltar, then their holdings towards the Holy Land could be become vulnerable, because they could be cut off. So that we can see why that could be important, this region, to the Hittites. And then we've got these arrows showing the conflict between Egypt and the Hittites, and they're also going to have conflict for this region coming towards the Holy Land. Just so we can try to get a visual representation of what we're saying. And then the Assyrian Empire, as the Assyrian Empire starts to grow, if we start to expand this Assyrian Empire, we can see how they're going to become a problem for Egypt and the Hittites with their let's say their holdings or their influence in this region. And Egypt's going to start to lose its influence, and eventually the Hittites are going to start to lose their influence because of the power of Assyria. And if we just go to a source, I noticed on this page it says down here that there was a marriage. So the Hittites and the Egyptians start to negotiate treaties and enter into an alliance with marriage, because they can see the threat. The threat is to both of them is the growth of Assyria, and that's going to be a problem for both Egypt and the Hittites. And now you can see that the Hittites are going to start to lose their control and their power in this region. And we learn from the sources that the Hittites start to become they start to come under attack from all different directions, and eventually their empire falls and crumbles. And Egypt also starts to weaken, because they're just no match for they're no match for Assyria. So I hope you found the video interesting. What we're gonna try to do is now move to the next empires. So think about the Assyrian Empire, and then go towards the Babylonian and the Persian, so we can start coming closer to the time of the Romans. But now we just have a bit of a visual idea of what we're actually looking at, and how the picture that we have it's different to this one, and then which one makes more sense and which one holds up. That's obviously up for people to decide and to investigate. So thank you for watching this one, and we'll see you in the next video.